We're going to look at trimming a text block. It's something I get asked about quite a lot. If you have a plough or a guillotine, then that's fine, just do it in the usual way, but a lot of people don't. So I often get asked whether there's an alternative way to trim a text block. So the method we're going to be using is looking at trimming a block with a paring knife. So first of all, we'll trim the foredge in this particular case, which we need to do before you round the text block, assuming you're going to round it. Obviously, once it's rounded, you can't trim that flat. So you do the foredge first, then you round the text block, and then you do the head and tail. And the reason we do that after rounding is because that helps to reduce the swell that you get at this end. If you try to do the trimming at this point, before you rounded the spine, that swell would mean that it'd be very difficult to clamp this at this point very tightly, and you do need to clamp tightly to do this, so do that after rounding. So we'll do the the foredge. So first of all, we need a wooden board, and behind that we're going to use a piece of card. Now this text block has waste sheets either side. It's important often to have waste sheets just to protect your text block, but here it also is useful because it helps hold the book in place, which can be a tricky thing. So I've got a piece of grey board with a little piece of double-sided tape on it, and that's just going to hold the book in place while I cut it. Obviously the waste sheet is removed later, so it doesn't matter if that double-sided tape damages the paper. We then need another piece of card with another piece of double-sided tape on, which is going to be positioned exactly where I want the cut to be. So I'm doing this by eye, but of course you would normally have a line drawn where you want the cut to be, so you know exactly where it's going to cut. So there we go. Then another board will go on top, like so, lined up again with where the cut is going to be, and that can then all go into the press. Like so. It's always tricky, this bit. Get that in, and then we can adjust it slightly if we need to. Actually, that's pretty good. Securing those grey boards does make a big difference actually. It's otherwise you need about 4 hands in order to hold it where it needs to be. There we go. So the top of that grey board and the top of this wooden board are aligned exactly where the cut needs to be. Just make sure the book block hasn't skewed out of shape. No, that's fine, that's ready to go. And now what I need to do is tighten the press. It does have to be tight. It also has to be evenly tight, so that this space here is the same as this space here. Otherwise the pressure on parts of the book varies. There we go. Nice and tight. Okay, and now we're ready to cut. The tool that we'll be using is a French paring knife. You could probably use any kind of a paring knife or similar knife. The reason I use this is because it's got the curved edge, and I prefer that in using this method. I find that easier. But importantly, the knife has to have an absolutely flat back and a chamfered side on the other side. So you can't use a blade that has chamfers on both sides, such as a craft knife or Stanley knife, because if you did that, then you'd end up with a cut that goes at an angle. What it does have to be, however, is very sharp. So I'm just going to strop this firmly on both sides, absolutely flat on one side, chamfered on the other. Okay, and we're going to cut this basically by putting the blade flat on the edge of the wood. So this piece of wood, firstly, it has to be a reasonable thickness so that you can get a good surface to work from, and it has to be absolutely flat and square and true, because that determines the angle at which you're going to cut the book block. So essentially what I'm doing is pushing down so that it's flat against this surface whilst moving along. And I'm doing it in such a way that I'm intending to just take off 1 or 2 pieces of paper at a time whilst I'm doing this. You'll notice the board is out of the press a little bit so that I've got room to put my hand in. But you just set that up in a way that's comfortable for yourself. And so I'm just going to work on this, pushing down, taking my time, removing any debris that's in the way, because if that gets under the knife it's going to affect the angle. So I'll just go through this and we'll see what it's like at the end. Okay, so that's the text block cut. Get rid of the debris. And so what we have there is a nice smooth surface, right angles, because it's based on the level of this piece of board. So I'll take that out. And there we have a lovely smooth surface. Now you can just leave it like that and it's pretty good actually. Looking at it, it's quite reflective, quite shiny, so I know it's very flat, it feels lovely and smooth. However, what you could do is also sand that, put it in the press as it is, piece of board either side, press it really hard and sand it with some fine sandpaper, at least sort of 400 to 600 grit, if not finer. 600 is a good one to finish on. The approach is the same, as I say, on the top and the bottom, although I would round it first and then cut it. But that's an easy, straightforward way of cutting a book block. As I say, the key to it is having a very sharp knife and a knife that has a flat back and a chamfered front. So personally, as I say, I prefer this sort of curved one. I think that's a nice way of doing it, but I know you can do it with a straight edged knife as well. So I hope that helps.